On. Hi everyone, I'm Marcy McCarrow,
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Cooper.
and we're here today with Cheryl Douglas, who's a women empowered coach, founder of Femmessence, and it's your time to shine women's events. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Cheryl Douglas. I'm the founder of Women of Femmessence, and I am indeed, like you said, Master, a women empowerment coach. And my website detail is www.femmessence.com. I can also be reached inside my women's group on Facebook, and that the name of that group is Purpose-Led Women Emerging Empowered. I can also be reached via LinkedIn, and that is www.linkedin.com/in/femmessence.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We will prompt you again to give those details if anybody's not quite got them at the end of the interview. Okay. So I've been on your website, Cheryl, and pulled off a beautiful quote, really, from it. And it says, through my women-focused coaching programs, I help heart-centered, purpose-driven business and professional women gain the confidence, clarity, and courage to discover who they really are at heart, embrace their true gifts and talents, take inspired action to achieve what matters most to them, and thrive in choice-rich, empowered lives. Wow. That's a really nice quote. So we'll come back to look at that and unpick that in some more detail. But what services do you offer?
The services that I offer in the main are coaching, my coaching services, and I do that via one-to-one coaching as well as group coaching, and that can take the form of a 28-day program, which is more like a 30-day by the time I tack on a little bit there at the end, as well as a 12-week one-to-one program and a 12-week group coaching program, as well as a 6-month one-to-one program.
Right, okay. So a number of things there. So we'll unpack those as we go along a bit more. Yeah. So what was the driver for you setting up the business?
The driver was, as it is for a number of women, redundancy. And my background is varied. Some people would say, you have a checkered past, but this is a checkered past in the most, I would like to think, wonderful of ways. I have had the privilege of working and living in a number of different countries.
Yeah.
And, working in academia, I worked in Japan. I was a university lecturer there. I've worked in training and development. I've worked in organizational development, and I think the organizational development piece, that was the role I had. That I think that being made redundant from that role launch padded, if that's a word, my business.
Yeah.
It wasn't then what it is now, because I was an organizational development consultant in that role. And so when I left, I think when we leave a particular role, we tend to go into something else. If we're self-employed, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times we go for what we know.
Yes.
And so early part of my work, was, in the form of a consultancy or a budding consultancy, looking at doing training and development in organizations. It was a tough nut to crack. And then I asked myself, why am I doing this? I'm not really an organizational person at heart. I'm not your typical corporate animal. So why am I, now that I have my own free wings to fly and light wherever I want, why am I knocking on organization doors? And so, long story short, that evolved into me working with women, because when I searched my own heart that is the piece of work that I really, really wanted to do. And it took me being diagnosed with, I'm not sure if you would have heard this story before, Marcia, but it took me being several years on now, being diagnosed with, I think the best way to describe it is an orange size, the size of a small orange. It was 12 by 12 when first discovered tumor in my liver. And it was that really shook me up. It shook me up. My daughter was only 5 at the time. And I thought, my liver, you know, this size of a tumor. And I think that's when I made my pact with God or universe or Allah, Buddha, what source, whatever we call him, her, or it. I said, you know what? I'm not prepared to go anywhere right now. I'm sorry. We're going to change those plans up a bit. My daughter's only 5, and I don't plan on leaving her right now. I want to see her into adulthood.
Absolutely.
Support her all the way through. You know better than even me that one of the reasons I am so grateful of, you know, I got made redundant is so I can have the freedom to work around her schedule and build my business up around that. You know, I'm barely getting started. I'm not going anywhere yet. You know, so, you know, give me a chance here. Work with me. I need to see these 2 things through. See my daughter through and be the best possible role model I can be for her.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of personal life and in terms of choosing her own destiny, and to see my business flourish.
Yeah.
And long story short, in the beginning it was thought that this tumor was malignant. Thank goodness it wasn't. And you know, I look at it as a bit of a double blessing. One, the fact that it wasn't malignant, that it was benign, and the other being that of all the organs it could have chosen, it chose the organ that even if 40% of it were removed, that 40% by now has grown back.
Yeah, regenerated.
You know, one of the few organs that can. Yeah. And so it was while I was recuperating that the whole piece about Femmessence came to me. And it just grew from there. It just grew from there. The whole archetype quiz that I have developed around the different archetypes of the Femmescences came out of that period.
Fantastic. Wow. Brilliant. How old's your daughter now?
She is 11.
Wow. Yeah, so time has passed. Brilliant.
Time has passed, yes.
What do empowered lives look, feel, act like? What does that mean, empowered lives?
You know, Marcia, that is such a fantastic question, because I always hold in my heart space for women to define that for themselves. I have no business defining, or anybody else for that matter, defining what empowered lives should look like to women. Each and every woman, it is her right and really her duty, that's as far as I'll go in being this forward, to define what an empowered life would look like or should look like for her. If I would say anything around an empowered life, is that it's a life that is choice rich.
Yeah.
Whatever you want those choices to be for you, that is, you know, your decision to make. But a choice rich life, and I dare add, I know it isn't the case for everyone, and that is perfectly fine, but in most economies of the world, it is essential that a part of what it is to be empowered includes financial empowerment for women. My coach said something fantastic a week ago when we were going through aspects of my business, and she said, you know, that I love that line. I love that line, Cheryl, because when you aren't empowered, you are easily overpowered.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely brilliant. And I know you've alluded to earlier about the distinction between working with women and working with men. So linking those two elements together, the empowered woman, is there room for the empowered man too within your what you do, or you just carving out a niche for women?
Both, both. Definitely my work is with women, and I think there is part of my very definitely part of my background, you know, probably ancestrally, I don't know. And when I say ancestrally, I do not just limit that to my race. I think it goes way beyond
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
There's that ancestral programming, I imagine, that has lent itself to the empowerment of women being something near and dear to my heart. Having said that, I am all for men becoming empowered as well. And this is something I say repeatedly. For women, the conversation has begun. The conversation of women empowerment has begun. It is well down the road. It is a firmly established platform. And, you know, it's for us to build on.
Mm.
The conversation of men empowerment, true empowerment, hasn't even begun. And that saddens me. When we look at the male model around which pretty much all of society is built and established now for over a century, its beginnings was very much around divide and conquer. It was very agentic. It was going in there. It was, you know, and slashing and burning to build things up. And it needed perhaps in some respects to happen that way. We will, you know, our forefathers were forging new ground, establishing new and laying claim to new territories. And yes, there was bush to clear and civilizations to set up. And in the foundations of some of that work, some of those actions may have been necessary. Over 100 years on, it is a model that doesn't serve most men anymore, let alone women. It is a model that has become enormously burdensome for most men. But sadly, the conversation isn't happening there, because whereas us women have broken the mold of little girls shall be seen and not heard, we don't adhere to that anymore in the main in our cultures. But for men, stiff upper lip,
Yes.
hold your on,
Yes. Yes.
all those taken for granted sayings that are embedded in our lexicon still hold. And it's very hard for men and the conditioning that they have received before birth to buck that. But it's time it be bucked. The time has come for it to be bucked.
There's, you know, change is here. Change is all around us, and this could be a great time for some of those men to look at their lives differently and see what they want to change about their lives too. Not
I
just
hope so. I hope so. Totally, I hope so. So yes, there is room in what I do for what I call soul-aligned men. The men who are willing to crack it all open, see what's in there, and forge a new way forward for themselves.
Yeah, fantastic. You alluded to earlier that all the different roles that you've done over time, you know, being a trainer, being a counsellor, being a lecturer, working in organisational development. And I know when you've actually lived abroad, because you mentioned that earlier, but I know that from some of the information that I've got off your website that you've done a lot of stuff abroad. So you could have taken the path of least resistance, if you like, and set up maybe a counselling practice and done some of the work that you're doing with women through that avenue. Have you found that setting up the coaching practice was actually the easiest route to do. And, you know, in hindsight, are you happy with the fact that you set up the coaching practice in the way you have?
Totally. It wasn't easier.
Imagine.
It wasn't the easier option at all. There is something about me, I'm yet to figure out what it is. I seem to not think and follow the easiest route.
I'm with you.
Never works.
Never works. Life would probably be a lot easier if I did, but you know, I'm not cut from that piece of cloth. For me, my background is psychology, and I do have a master's degree in psychology, and I could have gone on to pursue, you know, becoming a psychologist, so that is gaining my doctorate in it. I never fitted it. I never fitted it. Nothing is wrong with it. It has its place. However, when I learned of coaching, the immediate words that came to me were the democratization of counseling. To me, coaching made deep work, deep healing work available to the masses in a way that counseling did not and still is not being made available today. And I do not say that with any disrespect to anyone who is in counseling or any of my counseling colleagues. As I said, it has its place, and great and important work is done through counseling. What I love actually about coaching and the modes of coaching that I have been trained in is that it doesn't allow people to relive and constantly regurgitate what it is that actually traumatized them and they're trying to escape years and years ago. The mode of coaching that I do is intended, yes, to look at what happened. Don't spend too much time in there because it happened. Take the learning pieces from that experiences that empower you. I remember in my counseling job that I had when I was a counselor for abuse women and children in Canada. On one of our office walls was the Chinese character for chaos. And in this great lockdown, or the great pause, or the great reset, whatever we choose to call this current moment, I've been hearing a lot about it again. And that is a lot about within the Chinese character for the word chaos also lies the Chinese characters for the word opportunity. And this, now I am going back here over 20 years ago, closer to 25 or so years ago, but that's always stayed with me. And wherever I've moved to, I always took that with me. So it warms my heart no end to hear it being, you know, become part of the mainstream media so much. Now, I've never verified it with any of my Chinese counterparts or friends to see if it's true. Maybe I should. But, you know, it's one of those likable things. But as hard as this might be to swallow, in everything that has ever happened to us, however horrific the trauma, there is always in there an opportunity for your healing. I liken it to me when my husband and I lived in Pakistan for a while through my husband's job. And the first summer, I went crazy on Pakistani mangoes. Now, I come from the Caribbean originally, and there were mangoes all around. So going to Pakistan, seeing mangoes, I just went mad with mangoes, and I just ate mangoes galore. And they were lovely mangoes, absolutely lovely, some very fragrant. But then I had eaten so much, for some ever reason, my arms broke out in a rash. And one of my colleagues, one of my Pakistani colleagues said to me, you know, Cheryl, what you need to do is the seed. You need to bake it and then ground it into a powder and then spread that powder all over your arms, and that gets rid of it. It did. So now the mango is not chaos, but it did cause a bit of chaos on my skin, and the cure for it was in the mango seed itself. You know, and that's how I see that. But yes, that's my take on coaching versus counseling. Nothing is wrong with counseling; it has its place, but coaching has so made healing and the addressing of issues and the undoing, the overcoming of traumas available to a wider range of people. And I remember after doing one of my particular training courses, my hypnotherapy training course to be specific, coming out of that, I thought to myself, my God, I can't look at the average man or woman the same way again, because almost all of us, unless you are the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa, there are broken pieces within each of us.
Wow. Your passion for your topic is undeniable. I mean, I could sit and talk to you all day long. It's brilliant. You know, and I can see where you get your passion from and the journey that has led you to where you are today. What inspires you, though?
What inspires me? I think the answer for that is threefold. People are probably expecting to hear Oprah, and she inspires me no end, and Michelle, you know, they're my inspiration girls, no end. But the very first Oprah and the very first Michelle Obama for me was my mother. And I would put alongside her my grandmother. And when I think of empowered women, I think of those two women, from my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother as well. Both grandmothers they got along swimmingly, but they could not be more different in character. The grandmother who lived the longest and with whom I had the opportunity to spend the most time because she was with us longer, I was also fortunate to grow up with her in my formative years, while my mom, because I'm from Tobago originally, and my mom and dad went to Trinidad as my mom got admitted into studying midwifery. And I grew up with my grandmother. Now, she stood no higher than 5'3" at a push, but she was a force of nature. She was an absolute force of nature. She was not traditionally employed because in her generation, women were not. Yeah. And most definitely not if you had 9 children, as she did. Wow. And my grandfather was a quieter man. And I couldn't see how we can be any other because there wasn't...
There was no room.
No room for it. No, that's
it without question, she was, you know, your quintessential matriarch. Yes. She was, but a beautiful soul, and an encouraging soul, a nurturing soul, but a take no bullshit from no one soul, and a strong soul. And that was her. And she, you know, when none of her children, so like my dad and his siblings, they did not go on to high school. That was not something that was available to the masses in the Caribbean as a whole at that time. So I was the first grandchild to go on to free high school. And, you know, passing common entrance, which was a massive thing then. You know, it was published in the national newspaper, your name and the school that you got accepted to. It was there. And she was as proud as Peach. and just everything that she couldn't be, she wanted me to become. So that was my grandmother, my mother the same, you know, and both my parents, they grew up from they came from poor families. 9 on one hand, 11 on the other, my mother's side, and they always had enough to eat because my grandfathers were, you know, they were farmers in their own right. But, you know, I look at my daughter's closet and I think to myself, my God, a far cry from anything my mother would have imagined as a child.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunities to go on to high school did not exist. It was paid high school at that time, couldn't be afforded. So, you know, it's the strength and the perseverance and the aspirations of those two women that drive me on. And the third woman in the making is my daughter. And just seeing how she navigates the world, even at 11, in her way of thinking, that inspires me no end. That, you know what, with this cohort of women coming through like my daughter, I think the world would be in a very fine place. And absolutely, and last by no means least are the women who I see come through the other side of what seems to be so many broken pieces under the facade of a smile and all their successes, and coming through my program, you know, just being so self-possessed, knowing who they are without a shadow of a doubt, and going forward to achieve what matters most to them. Not what anyone else said should matter to them, what they have defined for themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cheryl.
I'm absolutely, I'm just listening to that, and it's just such a
mind-blowing.
It is. It's mind.
And you see now honestly, why I was chasing this lady. I have my trainers on, and
I think I'm looking at my question. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So, do you think, Cheryl, that you've come into your own, which I think you have, with the role you're doing now with empowering women? Where do you think you are? You know, where, you know, have you come into your own there?
It's a journey. It started out as a journey, and I think it'll always be a journey. And I am further along in that journey than I was a year ago. I was further along, and I'm further along now in that journey than I was 6 months or even 2 months ago. It is a journey, but I have a far more authentic and aligned sense of self now than I did when, say, I operated in the corporate world and in the early days of starting out in my business, when there were still fragments of what I should be doing.
Yeah.
That is something that I have learned, and I still continue to learn to relinquish, because it doesn't serve me or anyone else that I serve. I know what I'm here to do at this particular point in time, and that satisfies me and thrills me no end. And I feel enormously privileged to be, you know, working with the women I work with. But that I have come into my own, it's a lovely question. It is a journey. I feel a lot more confident in who I am now than I was a few years ago.
It shows. It absolutely shows, and spiritually, and just that center core about you is just so broad and inviting. But, you know, that has it's so special, absolutely so special. So going back to my next question, which is really hard here. What have been the challenges to getting where you are today, and how have you overcome them? In what way? have you done that?
That's a great question, Carol. Because before doing a lot of my work, you know, I think my ready answer would have been, you know, getting doors to open when I knock on them, or push on them, which was, you know, that's very much a part of my archetype. And I think doing my own inner work made me realize that the biggest challenges that stood in my way were my own limiting beliefs. It was me.
Yeah. I knew that was coming.
Now, it was me. I won't say that there aren't real obstacles out there as well. There are. So I don't wish to diminish anyone's experience. You know, anyone who is trying their darnest, you know, from a very earnest place, and, you know, they're just bumping up against a wall instead of a door that's ready to yield. But at the end of the day, it's me. And one of the things when I started to do my work is that I realized I had to take responsibility, even for situations that seemed, you know, unyieldable. It was for me to find another way, or to leave it alone. Maybe it's not mine. It's not me. And yeah, to answer your question, that was me, and me uprooting and releasing a lot of my limiting beliefs. And that is ongoing, because,
Yes,
you know,
Yeah,
it's like, you know, this, it's like plucking weeds from your garden.
That's absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Just when you think you've sorted that patch, some sneaky little ones just keep coming back.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
I get that.
I recognise that in me as well, which is, you know, something that I got in my own way and tripped myself up a lot. And, you know, it's a bit thing when I got a bit older, I realised, you know, pull yourself together and think it through, but you're still learning all the time.
Absolutely.
So, Cheryl, do you have any regrets?
I have to think on that one, and my intuition says no. And so I will go with my no. Perhaps there are things I could have done differently if I knew then what I know now. But I didn't. I didn't. And if I had known then what I know now and had made different choices, would I be the person I am today? Would I be able to speak from the same truth? Would I be able to help women in their journeys in the same way? Perhaps not.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, I have no regrets, because each life situation, whether it turned out the way I wanted it to or not, even the ones that did not, they are all the blessings in disguise. That's what I realize now. They have all evolved to be blessings in disguise.
That sounds really hopeful there. So what would you say have been the lessons you've learned by your blessings in disguise, be it challenges? You say not regrets, but the challenges there. So what have you learned by all of that?
That's a brilliant question. You know, I remember very early in my journey of being self-employed, and I did this pitch at a networking. It was an evening networking meeting for women, and I can see it now. And there were about 15 or so of us there, and I had this PowerPoint presentation, you know, and I had, you know, things flipping in and whizzing out and all that sort of stuff. And I remember when I sat afterwards and did my own self-assessment as to what I could have done differently. what lessons have I learned? How can I tweak it for, you know, the next time around? The words that came to my head were, and I'll share this as my lesson: nothing is ever wasted.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever wasted. So we may have an experience, or we may do a body of work and then realize after, oh my goodness, there's no need for that now. Don't dismiss it.
Yeah.
Don't throw it away.
Mm.
Some aspect of that is intended to serve you. Nothing is wasted. That's my life lesson.
I think that's, yeah, I agree with you
Fantastic.
totally. Even notes that you write on a pad, you know, in a meeting. I've
Yes.
come back to things and thought, oh, that's got something about it that I didn't
Yes,
think so.
yes.
But
This is giving me goosebumps. Honestly, it's giving me goosebumps.
It's wonderful. It's so, I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
I know, I
Ladies.
know. So this is a lovely question. I love this question. And how important is it for you to inject fun into your delivery?
It is massively important.
Yeah.
It's massively important. I think the women that are attracted to working with me, we have a lot in common to begin with, hence the attraction. And for me, fun is important. Laughter and joviality are important. Life, especially now,
Yeah.
you know, is challenging enough without us injecting fun and laughter and something that makes our heart sing beyond our work. If it does that, we are lucky that ours does. But it is massively important, you know, be that engaging in something that is fun with my family, loads of fun with my daughter now that she is being homeschooled, and even in my business itself. It's, you know, sometimes in the thick of a therapy session, a client saying something that just has us both in stitches, you know, as tears from whatever is streaming down her face, and there's a laughter going off at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I do believe that laughter is the best medicine. It is still one of the most powerful therapeutic medicines.
Absolutely.
I think that that's 100% right. And I think that it's all about this wonderful way that you can make people feel and they feel about you. So that really is key, I think. And that comes over really well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Oh, gosh.
So back to me again, Cheryl, with a few questions. We've talked about coming into your own. And so I want to look at that in relationship to success. So how do you see the relationship between coming into your own and being successful?
Well, that's a powerful question. That is a powerful question, because success and coming into your own can be two very separate things.
Yes.
There are people who have come into their own and aren't yet successful, even by their definition of success, let alone what society's definition of success is. So there are people who have come into their own, and that is a piece still being worked on. And there are people who have not come into their own fully yet, who are wildly successful. So for me, true success has, in large part, a part of its definition as coming into your own, as in being comfortable in your own skin and being totally at peace with your authentic self. And that has nothing to do with riches and wealth per se. Some of the most successful, wealthiest people I know aren't wealthy. but they sleep far more peacefully at night than a lot of wealthy people do. Now, that isn't, you know, a damnation against money and wealth and wealthy people. You know, I am not one of those people who ascribes to money is the root of all evil, because it is not. Money serves a purpose. And it, as I said earlier, it is very important that everyone, especially as women, be financially self-sufficient. But in the definition of success, coming back to that piece, I think knowing and owning who you are, and then building everything on top of that, from that point onward, that is a massive piece of what being successful entails.
So, would you consider yourself to be successful? Should have seen that one coming.
That's a good one. I would like to think that I am on the road to becoming successful. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a journey. It's a journey. And it's success in the fullest sense of the word.
Yeah, fantastic. So in business, we're always trying to do so many different things, especially when we're in 1-man, 2-man, 3-man bands where we're trying to do everything within the business. But we recognise that there's one skill, strength, or ability that stands out for each and every one of us, that stands out above all the others. And Carol and I, for a long time, have been calling them business superpowers. So when we're talking about people, we'll go, such and such, that's her business superpower, or that's his business superpower.
Yeah.
What would you say is your business superpower and why?
Wow. I think one of my business superpowers, of course, I'm not powerful in every aspect of business at all, but I think one of my business superpowers is connecting with people from the heart.
Yes.
From the heart, and being able to communicate with people from the heart. I think both go hand in hand. So it may sound like two, but I think they're both intertwined.
Absolutely.
So it's that heart-to-heart connection, and that heart-to-heart communication. Yeah. Sometimes even in the absence of words.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd written a note down already that it was about your ability to engage with people and tap into that authentic them while you're doing that engaging. That what you call that connectability, that for me is one of your business superpowers. I think you have more than one. I certainly think you have more than one.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Thank you. I accept that gracefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
That was great. Cheryl, I want to ask you, is there a book or an article that you've read recently that had some sort of significant impact on your journey? And if there has been, could you tell us about that, and why was it so significant to you?
I'm looking at my row of books here. Either side of me. And there are a number of them, to be totally honest with you. But I think the one that immediately jumps out is one that I am listening to and just ordered the hard copy of it, because I do more listening these days as I have less time to read, but I still make time to read. And when a book that I'm listening to is so profound, I need to get into it deeper, I have to have the hard copy as well.
Yeah.
And that book for me is Everything is Here to Help You. Everything is Here to Help You by Matt Kahn, I think is his name. And doing my morning walks. Well, my morning walks now, for the most part, I do with my daughter, now that she's home, so I don't have my books going in my ears that much anymore. But at the weekend, I tend to do them on my own. I can go a bit quicker and listen to my book. And I'm sure people think I'm on the brink of insane, especially when they whiz, I whiz past them and I'm shouting, yes, because what, what I heard has so landed, so resonated with me. And it goes back to what I said earlier on about that, the Chinese character for chaos, and in the midst of that is also the character for opportunity. And opportunity in the sense that even in the midst of all hell breaking loose, there is something here that's meant to serve you. And that's where I find alignment with that book. And I could not, I have recommended it, to pretty much all my friends and relatives so far. And I would recommend that book wholeheartedly. Funny, I never heard of Nat Khan before. I just happened upon him in Audible. But it is such a deeply soul-nourishing book. I have to recommend that one as being quite profound for recent reads.
Well, we know what our next purchase is then.
Absolutely.
So, reflecting on all your experiences, how do you think you've supported others to achieve? And what has been their feedback to you? What have they been feeding back to you?
Is that from my journey going way back, or we're talking about my current coaching practice?
I think just all your experiences, just reflecting on, something that has happened recently or happened years ago or whatever, just whatever it rolls into, just all your experiences.
Wow, this one calls for a lot of humility. So when my answer here is from a completely humble place, because I have been humbled by these responses and the feedback. A couple come to me. More than a couple do, but I'll talk about these two. And one of them goes back to when my husband and I lived in Pakistan, and I was a consultant at the organization that he worked for. And one of the things that I was asked to do as soon as I arrived, was to set up English language classes for the local Pakistani employees. And I think that the organization had in mind that I'll just kind of whiz in there and pull people together and just start, teaching English to everyone, regardless of their English language ability. But they were a little bit surprised when I said, well, no, we can't do that. We have, a variety of levels here. So they need to be assessed. And it's going to take this length of time. It was also part of their Investors in People initiative. So they needed things to happen quite quickly. And I said, well, I can work as quickly as I can, but this piece needs to happen. Well, does it really? Yes, it does. It does. So I did that and got to the UK-based employees who were also trained in teaching English as a second language or as a foreign language. They came on board, and then I said, well, they have to be paid as well. Oh, really? Well, yeah, they're giving up their extra time to teach.
Good idea.
They're giving up their extra time to prep and teach, I'm not volunteering, and neither are they. So, okay, then we'll look at that. So they end up getting paid as well. But we ended up with about 7 different bands of no English to pretty much high functioning level English. And I remember teaching one of the higher functioning level classes, and they were all a joy, and every single level was an absolute delight, an absolute joy. And one of the things to this day that still warms my heart is the image of walking into that organization in the morning prior to English classes coming there. And especially the local staff who did not speak much English, hardly ever lifting their heads when they say good morning. And fast forward the better part of a year, and it was the greetings, the confidence that came with greeting, and initiating that greeting when they had the language. But I remember, so we organized a graduation ceremony, the lot, and I remember in the graduation ceremony, one of my students and colleague saying to me, said, Miss Douglas, I've actually worked on taking on your teaching style. He said, I teach university in the evenings. And he said, I always stop and think, okay, how would Miss Douglas explain this? And he said, I try to take on your mannerism, your persona, when you explain things in just the kindest way that you do. He said, I thank you for that. And I thought, wow, money couldn't buy that for me. No. Money couldn't buy that. The second one would be one of my clients who has just come to the end of her program, and she's been with me 9 months. And I remember when she first started working with me, the level of trauma and self-doubt that this woman embodied was just painful, just really, really painful. The trauma starting from childhood all the way through. And in our final celebration call last week, it was her saying, when I look back, Cheryl, she said, I couldn't even think straight when I came to see you. And here I am, telling you about how much my debts have reduced. I remember when we started going, and mine is not financial planning. This was not about financial planning, but it was all part of her trying to get things lined up and prioritized. And she has knocked things off that I didn't even know she was working on. And she said she talked about that. And she talked about, only having 2 outstanding debts at this point in time, which she is so on top of and would be cleared in a couple of months' time. And just talking about her plans to, her 5-year plan. She couldn't even think 5 days ahead of where she was at that current point in time, but listening to a very lucid, coherent 5-year plan and being on top of it already. And just the gratitude she expressed for helping her to be in this place now, where she now has, in her words, for the first time in her life, at 49, the self-belief to see things through was just humbling.
Amazing. That is amazing. Absolutely. What a wonderful story, or 2 stories there, but that was absolutely fabulous. This next question, Cheryl, it's about contentment, and it's about you professionally and personally. Where do you find your contentment?
I think I find my contentment. It's funny, I kind of go back here to my paternal grandfather. And he was just one of the coolest dudes I knew. Nothing ever ruffled his feathers. My mom would say, nothing ever ruffles his feathers because you were his grandchild. Try being his child. That was a completely different story. But it's a different relationship that grandparents have with their children. But I just remember my grandfather, being a very tall and contented man with the deepest baritone voice I have ever heard, even now. And one of his favorite sayings was, all is well with my soul. And he lived that. He lived that. All is well with my soul. It took me a very long time to get to a place where I can say I'm almost there, or I can say all is well with my soul. One of the things that I do in my area of work, I start off by women going through this quiz, the self-assessment quiz, in which they identify their archetypes. And I know you are very familiar with archetypes in the work you do. This is a very soul-based archetype, and it's based on what I have sort of distilled out to be. There are more. Some people have more, some people have less. But I have distilled out these 7 primary archetypes, so as I like to call them, essences, because they speak more to more. They're not just about our, MBT Myers-Briggs, MBTI.
Yeah.
It's more than just that. Your preferences. This is at a deep soul resonance. And very quickly, these 7 archetypes are the mother, the mystic, the maiden, the queen, the warrior, the lover, and the sage. Now, differently, they've existed probably from the beginning of time, because every single culture on earth has embedded into that culture different archetypes by different names. And they were seen as so powerful. In many cultures, they were given godlike features and references. So we have Athena and Aphrodite for the Greeks, and, Diana with the Romans and all of them. But, the Indians have them, the Chinese, the African cultures all have woven into their culture these essences, male and female. I work with the female. And my dominant archetype is the warrior. And I heard a little chuckle there, but it's the warrior. And it has served me in a lot of ways, but I oftentimes find now as I get older that I temper that with some of the attributes of other archetypes that are more readily soul connected. They reside there more. So that for me, when I think of being contented, it isn't so much my warrior, my inner warrior that speaks. I think it is more my inner mystic that speaks here. And that comes from me after more than half a century on this planet and seeing things come full circle, and know that if I am lucky enough to live a few more decades beyond this, to see more things come full circle, that everything always works out the way it should when it is meant to. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. I don't have it all together, and I wake up in the morning, every morning in that place. Sometimes during the course of the day, I have to bring myself back to remembering this. Everything that happens in the right time, and is intended to serve you in some one way or another. And that's where I take a lot of my contentedness and contentment from.
Wow, amazing lady. What does the future hold for you, Cheryl Douglas? Honestly, women empowerment coach, amazing, just amazing. And I'm dying to hear the answer to this. What does the future hold for you?
Oh, well, I don't know is the question there, in that I don't, if I had a crystal ball and could look into that and knew exactly what the future holds, that would be amazing. But what I hope the future holds is the opportunity for me to help more women as many women as I possibly could, and soul-aligned men, to become well and truly empowered on their own terms, by their own definition. That is what I hope the future holds for me, the opportunity to do that far and wide.
Mm. Cheryl, thank you so much. That really has been an experience for me to hear you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Marcia.
Cheryl, this is the part of the interview where I, first of all, get you to share again those contact details. Nice and steady. So everybody grab a pen.
Yeah, grab your pen, paper.
Put the phone number straight into your phone on speed dial.
Ready? I'm ready.
Awesome.
Give us those contact details, please, Cheryl.
Okay, all right. Okay, here goes. So my website is www.femmessence.com, and that Femmessence is FEMMESSENCE.com. My Facebook group, you can find that, is Purpose-Led Women Emerging Empowered. That's on Facebook, easily findable. I'm on Facebook as well. You can find me there, searching Cheryl Douglas. Of course, there are several of us, but I think, I'm easily recognizable. I think, and yes, your friend requests are welcome. And I am also on LinkedIn, www.linkedin/ no, I'll do it again, www.linkedin.com/n/Femmessence.
Fabulous.
And my phone number, business phone number, it's 07505 121 460.
Lovely. Fantastic. Cheryl, thank you so much. We, at the end of each of the interviews, we like to just share with the person that we're interviewing some of the messages that we are personally taking away, that we've gained from what you've said to us. And they probably won't be the words that you use, but it's about how we've translated those into messages for ourselves. Okay. And so I want to start by sharing just a few of them. What I will do, Cheryl, is I'll write them up. There are a few.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll send them to you on an email, okay? So you've got those. But I'm going to pick out a few, and then I'm going to pass over to Carol so she can share her messages with you too. So where do I start, really? Oh, there's just so many. Do things that make your heart sing. Regrets are blessings in disguise. Oh. Speak from your own truth. Be at peace with your authentic self. Know and own who you are. And the final one I'm going to look at is point of readiness. When you were talking about things that happen in our lives, that there's a point of readiness for each and every one of us, where things come together, things are aligned, and action can be taken. So it reminded me of points of readiness, really.
Lovely.
So things come our way when we are ready and open to receive them. Thank you so much, Cheryl. CC, what about you? What are you taking away?
Have we got an hour?
I know.
Oh my God. First of all, I've got to say, it's the striking passion of you, what you do, how you think and feel. I mean, that covers a multitude of areas that I've written down here, I have to say. And I know we don't have time to go through them all. But I just think your passion is wonderful, and your passion for life and the understanding of life. And obviously wanting to help all sorts of people. And doing that. And humbly accepting the accolade that maybe they might not have used the word an accolade or accolade, but just the way people treat you by the way you treat them. I've got too much written down here that I know will come into, you know, obviously together when Marcy and I do our summary of interviews. But it's inspiration, it's the determination to move on, it's to recognize that regrets aren't regrets, but the things that will, you know, are experiences. There's just too much here. And I'm really sorry, I'm dithering. No.
I hear you, Cece. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm humbled. I am indeed humbled. Thank you both ladies.
Absolute pleasure.
Yes, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Cheryl Douglas, for being with us today.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Carol. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you know what? If you ladies think I am all that, it's only because you're seeing yourselves. So thank you for allowing me to be your mirror as well.
Oh, thank you.